Broadcasting from the business capital of the world, this is the Podcast Business News Network. And welcome back, everyone. If you or somebody you know is caring for somebody, I don't have to tell you, it takes a lot out of you. And there can come a point where you may feel like you lost yourself in the process, in the journey. We're going to talk about reconnecting with yourself, connecting with yourself spiritually. Some call it spiritual resilience. And when we talk spiritual, we're not talking necessarily about religion, although some people connect it. Something very different, vastly different. And very helpful to learn about this today if you're a caregiver. She is somebody who coaches people on just that. Never knew it existed until I met Marika Humphreys. She's our professional of the year. She's back with us. How you doing?
I am doing well. Yes. I'm getting ready to turn another year older, as we just talked about. Got a birthday this week.
Well, happy pre-birthday.
Thank you. Thank you.
Cool. Very cool.
Yes.
You deserve a free day. That's. I hope you have plans of doing whatever you want to do that day.
Yes, I do have some plans.
Cool.
Yes.
Yeah, maybe that even just gets us into what we're talking about today. Being connected to yourself, staying connected to yourself. Is it that feeling, and you've been there, you've come from a place of understanding and experience. Did you feel while you were caring for your husband that it almost felt like I'm losing myself here in terms of my identity, and I'm so focused on this, I'm not focusing on me anymore?
Yeah, very much so. I think it was a subtle thing that I didn't really realize. So that's why I like to talk about it, because I think this does happen, and it can happen without us realizing it. But yeah, I and this can differ depending on, the level of caregiving you're giving. For me, I always consider myself mostly, I was a care partner, but it was my husband. So it was his cancer was something we dealt with every day. And there was so much focus on that all the time for a long period of time that I do think I just stopped thinking about my own, what I call now life journey. I didn't think of it in those terms, but really my own life, right? I stopped thinking about my own goals. I stopped the future. And that does happen, I think, to varying degrees with caregivers frequently. We naturally can suppress our own wants and desires. And that makes sense. Like from the outside, it makes sense that we do that. But so much of it is you can do that in the short term. That's the word I'm looking for. And you might need to if there's a crisis or a health crisis or something. But over time, and caregiving often lasts a long time, from months to years to sometimes for some people decades. That is not sustainable. And that is why I think it's a good thing to talk about, because it does happen gradually, that you just start placing your emphasis on this other person that you're caring for. You can become disconnected. And then I think it can become really hard to justify also taking time and attention and energy and maybe money and all of those things to do things for yourself when someone else is, in such need. So yeah, I definitely felt like I became disconnected from my own path for a good while. And how I discovered that was really, I started feeling a little resentful, kind of resentful of the situation I found myself in. And that's really how it showed up for me. It wasn't like, oh, I need to reconnect with myself. It was more like, this is just, I'm unhappy right now, and I'm not exactly sure why.
I see the resentful. It can even be, even outside of the caregiving situation. Let's say one spouse works, the other one maybe works part-time, does some stuff around the house, whatever. The one that's working a lot could look at the other one and say, really? I'm doing this and you're doing that for whatever the reason is. Some couples it works. That's okay.
Yeah.
But I can see, there can be some resentment coming in there. And then let's not ignore the elephant in the room. A lot of times when somebody is being cared for, they're going through some challenges. They sometimes can get, a little irritable and cranky with treatments and understandably so, but sometimes it seems like, they don't even care what I'm doing for them. And here I am. I'm not me anymore. I'm all in on taking care of them. There's so many different scenarios that come up here.
Yeah. And so it might be helpful to just start. You talked about calling this spiritual resilience, which is what I call it. And I definitely, that is not connected to, when we think of spiritual, when I say that word, I think of the things that nurture our spirit. That's when I think of spiritual resilience, what nurtures the spirit. And the way I define that for my clients is your connection to yourself and the things that you do for yourself, how you think about your own value, and thus, the things that you do to support yourself, and your connection to the greater world. And that can be other people in the world, as well as just the world, the greater world, like maybe nature or a hobby or organizations. So both of those things, I think, go into how we nurture our spirit, because those are the things that give us life, give our life meaning and joy. How we, our relationships, how we treat ourselves, how we live our days, that's what gives our life meaning. So when we become disconnected, either from ourselves or the world around us in some form, that's when we start to lose meaning and joy in our life, and therefore end up, kind of sad and unhappy. And that, I think, can come as a result of caregiving. And to the point here, I think one of the things that I think is most important to recognize or to maintain spiritual resilience is what I call the spiritual mindset, or the spiritual resilience mindset, which is that my own life is important too. Like when we're a caregiver, so much of that emphasis is on that other person, and that is often necessary. But you also have to have the mindset that my life journey continues and is important too. And when you have that mindset, like I matter too, then you can ask better questions of yourself. Like, how can I do these things? How can I be a caregiver and have some time for me as well? Or, have some joy in my life as well? Like, how can I do both? It doesn't have to be one or the other. But I think often caregivers, we don't, we tend to not have we tend to have the opposite mindset. And again, I think this happens subtly. It's not a conscious decision usually, but we tend to have the mindset of, oh, my needs aren't important right now. I'm just going to put those aside for now. But for now can become a long period of time. So, for those out there listening, like, this is it all resonating? You might have started doing that so gradually that you may not realize it. And now, you're wondering why you're unhappy. Ask yourself, have you stopped? Have you had the thought that, oh, my needs just aren't important right now? Well, guess what? Right now is our lives. Our lives are right now. So they have to be important. And our person we're caring for, their needs are important too. We can't have both. And I think we struggle with that mentality a little bit. It's hard. It's easier to think one or the other. Like, it has to be all this or all that. But it can be both. And then once you start figuring that out, how can it be both? How can I do this and support myself? That's a much better place to, start figuring it out.
So when you're in that situation, how do you release the guilt? Because I ought to believe that for many, that's preventing you from reconnecting with yourself and just focusing on taking care of that other person.
Yeah. And I think that's why I start with mindset, because when we have the view that our needs or our life isn't important, when we have that as a basic belief, and you can tack on right now, like because they're sick or they need me or they're, rely on my care. Therefore, my needs aren't important or my joy isn't as important right now. Then when you do things for yourself, you're going to feel guilty because it counteracts this underlying belief that that's not important. And so I shouldn't take any time for it. That's why we have the guilt. And I think that's why, again, and that's really common. I mean, really, really common. I've talked about this in several, I think, different kind of iterations, but that was a huge mindset shift for me to really recognize that my own journey was also important, even though my husband was battling literally for his life. Like that just felt like every problem feels like it should pale in comparison. And yet I want to make the argument that it doesn't, because it's your own problem. Like if your problem is just as valid as somebody else's, they may differ in degrees, they may differ in severity, but it's yours. And so therefore you're the only one that can do something about it. And I think when we kind of when we undervalue our own self, that's when the guilt will come up because we're taking time. So then if you go, let's say, take that walk, because it is something that nurtures your spirit or it's something that just, relaxes you, but you have to take some time away from, your loved one who really just wants you by their side. And I'm like, my client just faced this. We just talked about this very issue. Like that scenario happens all the time. And she had to really wrestle with herself. Like, I know he wants me here. Like he wants me here. And ideally he wanted her there all the time. But she knew that in order to maintain her sanity and to be there, she had to take those walks. So that kind of mindset of recognizing this, my life goes on also, and I can't ignore it because nobody else is going to live it for you. Like nobody else is going to be minding that. I think we want someone to, like, we want someone to give us permission, I think a lot of times. And that doesn't always happen. It's great if you do have your loved one does that for you or somebody does that for you, but really it's still more valuable to do it for yourself, to give yourself permission, recognizing that this is important. And I think maybe too, sometimes we need to believe why it's important. And I would say that ultimately when you do take the time to have a connection both to yourself, and maybe that's, I don't know, meditation or yoga, or again, taking the walks, or for me, a lot of times just being in nature, something that gives you energy, or the things that connect you to the outside world, other classes, connections with friends and relationships. Those are the things that keep you grounded and able to ride the waves of the challenges that caregiving can bring. And that is also why it's valuable too. So it's not just about what we tend to call, what we feel, I think a lot of times feels selfish. It's not just about that. It's like, if you want to be able to sustain over the long term as a caregiver and be able to ride the ups and downs and be able to show up with calm and patience and love, that you need that spiritual resilience, right? You need something that helps you keep you grounded to a bigger picture, to help keep you out of life. Is not just about all of my to-do list. There's more to my life. And that's why I'm able to show up for my to-do list. So that's really the underlying reason. And I think can maybe help with people struggle with the guilt, is like, this is just part of what equips us to be there for the long haul. And maybe even the short haul. I mean, I talk about it a lot because caregiving often is a long time, but it can be even the short term. I think you can still apply this. It's still important.
It's a cliche, but it resonates with me right now as they say, well, you have to, in the plane, you put the mask on yourself first before you put it on someone else. And that's what this almost sounds like. You're a better person, better caregiver, by making sure that you've got some air, you're feeling okay, you're feeling somewhat of yourself, as opposed to being burned out, resentful, just, no direction except one, caregiving. And that's not the best scenario. In our minds, sometimes we think it is because we love them, we want to do the best thing for them, but it's not the best.
Yeah, and I think we tend to talk about that scenario too because it tends to be where most people, like, it's just counter to how we think. Like, we need to be all in and have all of our focus. Obviously, there's some people too can err on maybe the other side where, but usually those aren't the ones that struggle with this. But yeah, how we take care of ourselves is how we is what allows us to be the best for other people. And caregiving is ultimately about another person, caring for another person. And even just as a parent or as a spouse or as a friend, right? When we're always exhausted, depleted, haven't slept, don't have anything, sense of like joy in our own life, we can't be good in those roles unless we are really good at faking it. And some people get good at faking it, but that's hard to do also for a long time. So it is about, making us better in that role. And I really firmly believe that. I mean, I believe that with my heart and soul, because in that sense, I have lived it. I did, when I really struggled as a caregiver, when I was suffering in my own life and feeling resentful and kind of disconnected, guess what? I started to turn internally and feeling sort of self-focused and a little bit sorry for myself. That's not the definition of who I wanted to be as a caregiver for my husband, So, but I was just doing that because I was miserable. When we're not happy, we focus on ourselves and our unhappiness. So when we can be happy, we're actually more able to give more, to be more for others.
Yeah.
But to get that, you have to take some time away, right? Take some time to nurture the things that bring you happiness and contentment and joy and peace. And that's the hard part to juggle.
What if you're not sure what those things are?
Yeah, then that's a great question, I think. I think, especially when you're caregiving, that's the time to just try. And a great technique to do that, I think some people have heard this before, but make a list of the things that you either enjoyed as a kid or always wanted to do as a kid. Because usually those things don't go away. And I mean, some of it, like I enjoyed art as a kid. And I actually just took an art class earlier this year. It's not a huge passion for me, but it is something I still enjoy. And I think like dancing as a kid, that was another joy of mine. That is something I actively do now. But that's a great place to start if you don't even know what gives you joy, what helps you feel connected or at peace or kind of filled up from your heart. Start with what you loved as a kid. And from there, then just be willing to try things.
Can I share something that connects with what you just said? So just a few months ago, I did a meditation with somebody, and they just say, hey, come in and let's do this. So they had me stare at an object. It was a squishy ball. I don't know if I shared this with you. Squishy ball.
Yeah. Uh-huh. Yeah.
Did I tell you this?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I think you said right about music.
It brought me back to being a kid again. When I say kid, I'm talking about in my low 20s, but it was a happy time for me, music, things that I was doing.
Yeah.
I only bring it up because it's connecting with what you're saying. And maybe it just takes time I am going to take the next 20 minutes and just sit and just think. Or maybe focus your eye on one thing, intentionally thinking, what makes me happy? And those things will come. They'll show up. What is it? Because I find, if you're in the middle of the caregiving situation, there's so many different things. I got to make appointments. I got to get this, got to get meds, got to insurance company, blah, 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 make sure they're comfortable, all that. And you don't even have a moment to just block that out and think and focus. But work for me, and I'm working on it. Trust me, trying to get back to those things that make you happy.
And you hit it right there. I think in that busyness, I mean, that is when I say connected to yourself, that is like if we were saying, what is the to-do list, or how do I get connected to myself? Having 10 to 20 minutes to yourself where you either, journal, meditate, sit in quietness. I mean, that is a great first start. And I guarantee if you simply ask, like you said, what are the things that bring me joy or happiness, or what do I enjoy? Mm-hmm. Like, as you said that, I was thinking to myself, what I would say, I mean, dance is one for sure, but just nature. I love, like in Washington, we have some great mountains, and I love being on a mountain. It's just like, it is like my happy place on earth. Now, that's not always doable on a day-to-day basis, but we also have great parks too. And so I can just go walk in a park and be in trees too. That's the other thing, mountains and trees. So that comes to mind now. So I know we all have those things, but it's really good to ask yourself on a regular basis. And I think that's probably the best first step, is just we need to take 15 to 20 minutes for ourselves each day to connect. Mm-hmm. Like, who am I? What are the things, what do I want this time next year? Those are just questions that I think are all about staying connected with who we are as people, what we value, what's important to us. And those are good things to have and to do when we're caregiving, because we lose sight of that.
I think even spiritually, if you ask, the answer will come either from within, you'll get it from the universe, something will download into you, but you need the quiet time. You do. It's essential.
Yes. And that, when you just nailed it, I think, by talking about our lives are busy, and we're always thinking about the next thing we need to do. And that is the first hurdle to get over, is just creating some time. And as a kind of a mindset coach, the first step is the reason why we do that. The reason why we stay busy is because of how we think. Like we have this thought process that I just need to do more, or if I get all the things done on my to-do list, which never happens. It took me a long time to recognize, like, there will always just be new things. Like, the to-do list will never go away. It will always just get filled again. So creating the time and believing that that's important, believing that it's worth doing.
And that their to-do list, for some, just going to say, and maybe for another podcast, but some create a long to-do list just so they can always stay busy, because they don't want to confront themselves or a situation. So it's planned chaos. Planned chaos. Yeah.
That's like next level. Yeah. That is a whole other podcast when we talk about that, right? Exactly. What are you avoiding, right? What are you avoiding?
Yes, 100%. How do we find you? If you're so unique and so wonderful in the way you think and support, Marika, how does somebody find you?
My website is the best place. I do have, I have a Facebook page, and I also have an Instagram, but my website is the best place, coachmarika.com. And that's Marika. So coachmarika.com. And on there, you will find a link to my podcast, where I did just do an episode coming out, I think, in 2 weeks, next week. No, it's coming out next week, on spiritual resilience in caregiving specifically. So that was kind of top of mind for me, because I was just kind of diving into that for my podcast. So and you can connect with me there, and as well as set up a consultation, or get on follow my podcast.
Excellent. If you ask anybody who's truly happy with life, and we all have things going on, always something happening, whether you're caregiving, whatever. If you ask somebody who says that, I'm good, more times than not, they'll tell you that, along with everything else, proper sleep, nutrition, exercise, etc., is the spiritual part. It just is. That's what we're talking about here. It's essential. It really is.
Yeah. Agreed.
Thank you so much for being here today. Really appreciate it.
All right. Always great, Steve.
You too. All right. Well, coming right back.
Broadcasting from the business capital of the world, this is the Podcast Business News Network.
Of course my kid's in the right car seat. Well, I think he is.
Yeah, my kid's in a booster seat. He was ready to move up. He is ready, right?
Her car seat looks like the right size.
There are probably rules on when to move up to a booster seat, aren't there?
Rear facing, forward facing. I think I have it right.
Car crashes are a leading killer of children 1 to 13. Are your children in the right car seat for their age and size? Don't think you know you know. Go to safercar.gov/the right seat.
I know my child's in the right car seat, or else I wouldn't get in the driver's seat.
Brought to you by the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration and the Ad Council.